Hello there, kia ora. Look, this week is a very short week in terms of content that I made because I've been kind of hectic. And, it helps that politics has actually been relatively quiet because the Prime Minister's been out and the Deputy Prime Minister's been out and David Seymour made all the noise at the start of the week. So, yeah, it has been a short week. I do apologise for that, but my week's been really hectic. I got invited to this, so I'll be in Wellington on the 7th of April. Working on the 6th of April. That'll be interesting. I went to Hamilton and did a quiz night, which we won. I caught up with family, and I've spent the last 2 days at concerts in Papakura and in Takutai Square, part of Britomart. So really hectic, and I apologise for there not being more stuff, but I've got to pay the bills. So anyway, enjoy the, shortened version of this week's Omnibus. And don't forget, if you haven't already, you can check out the interviews that we did on Friday night that went out. There is Dr. Malcolm Mulholland, who was last year's winner for the Kiwi Bank New Zealander of the Year award, local hero award winner, and we've got Mayor Sam Broughton, who's the mayor of Selwyn district, which is the fastest growing district in the country, which I didn't know before this meeting, for the interview. And he's also the president of LGNZ. So it's really fascinating stuff. It's all linked in the videos if you go and check that out. In the meantime, enjoy this week's Omnibus edition. Hello there, kia ora. It's been a fascinating weekend for watching our politicians. The Prime Minister winged his way to India, where he made an announcement about the start of bilateral trade talks with India, which seems like the sort of thing that they probably knew about in advance, because it's a long way to go for a let's maybe talk about the massive free trade deal with a country which is 40% vegetarian, 80% Hindu, 75% lactose intolerant, about a free trade deal for our dairy and beef exports. There was a handy-dandy graph which came out that showed just how historically unpopular Christopher Luxon is as Prime Minister. Quick spoiler, if you haven't seen it already, it's hovering somewhere between Ramsay Bolton and Joffrey Baratheon levels at the moment, and his premiership runs the risk of going down the Game of Thrones path, by not ending very well, with a rushed final act where everyone walks away asking what the hell just happened and why are we so unsatisfied with how it ended. And just like how the producers and actors from Game of Thrones gritted their teeth and told us that we would really love the ending, and we didn't, we saw a whole lot of misdirection from those in charge over the weekend. We had Shane Jones on Q&A, where he implied cameras on fishing boats as state surveillance and therefore bad, not like speed cameras or red light cameras or civic crime prevention cameras. He seemed to think public videos of shitty illegal activities would mean trial by TikTok. Not that the videos have to be released immediately to the public, and that the overwhelming evidence that these cameras have actually changed the way that commercial fisheries approach and deal with endangered species is, just circumstantial. Oh, and he made the really weird and actually scientifically wrong claim that Maui and Hector dolphins are actually the same thing. They're genetically different, with the Maui dolphins having a larger skull and Hector dolphins having larger snouts, and the difference is recognizable both by sight, if you know what you're looking for, and genetic testing. Oh, and he managed to get in a few woke jabs and damn young people today at Jack Tame as well, who actually did a great job of not pointing at the clouds that Jones was clearly rambling at. And then there was David Seymour. It started off with a completely oblivious Facebook post about why so many people are leaving Aotearoa, the country, the government he's part of, the one with the economy that they tanked with the worst recession since 90s, or the extra 22,000 people that are needing a benefit to survive that was announced on Monday morning, and then, the government that made the stupid decisions that have pissed people off. Well, then he started bad-mouthing the press when Benedict Collins asked about Seymour's comment about feeding food from previous school lunch programs to pigs, when it was revealed a Hawke's Bay school was also feeding their lunches from David Seymour's program to their pig. On Friday, he got all upset that a university is incorporating Te Tiriti into its courses. How very dare an educational institution take time away from students needing valuable learning time like that? But on Sunday, he said it was fine for students to miss out on learning time to deal with the issues from his school lunch program. 13,500 issues, which he called nitpicking. It's actually about the population of Wanaka. He even overestimated the number of successful deliveries, which may not seem huge because on paper there's a very little difference between 99 to 100%, which is what he said, and the 97.5% that have actually been successful. But since some of these nitpicks also include having to import frozen meals from Australia and a child who got burnt because food was packaged in containers that weren't graded to be reheated, which led to them also melting plastic into the food, those nitpicks are being minimized. He even said of the school in Huntley that chose to leave the program last week over substandard food that they had decided after overwhelming feedback to the community post announcing their decision that they were going to keep the lunch program going. They got 18 comments before they shut the comment section down, and most people were either tagging other people within the community, and at least one person was a senior couple from the Coromandel who just wanted to tell locals off for not just feeding their own damn kids. And there are a few that were left were split between thanking the school for the update and some disappointment there about the program ending. And the return to the program that he mentioned? Well, that was a follow-up post from the school telling parents that this week the school would be providing sandwiches and fruit. And to add insult to injury, not as bad an injury as a second-degree burn from an incorrectly packaged molten school lunch, but still an injury of sorts, the Herald ran this clickbait story headline on their socials implying another Hawke's Bay school loved the new program, but they were actually praising the locally produced on-site created school lunch program. There's always a lot going on, and spin is a key part of that for anyone in politics, no matter the party or political ideology. But there's some things that no amount of spin can hide, and that's the decisions that the public can see are causing harm, that are not at all what the public was promised or what the public expect. And having politicians who seem so bad at this, who get defensive when it's pointed out that their spin is off balance, well, that leads to the sort of results that we saw in that graph right at the very beginning. Now, this one, I'll put it up again just for shits and giggles, about the unpopularity of the Prime Minister and his government. Again, it's going to leave us feeling like the end of Game of Thrones at this, right? People are going to be walking away wondering, why on earth did we have to sit through all of that? Hello there, kia ora. At this stage, it kind of feels like David Seymour could announce that he changed his socks at a stand-up with the media, and it'd be making headlines within the hour. And sure, he might technically be acting Prime Minister right now, but that doesn't mean that the media has to platform everything he says. For a start, it highlights how little the media is actually asking questions around sexual offender Tim Jargo and what David Seymour knew. But it certainly means that since his party dipped into single-digit figures on the only poll that matters to the right, the taxpayer union Curia poll, he's been front and centre in media almost non-stop in an effort to avoid the party being relegated at the next election to below that 5% threshold. An outcome that inches closer every time that there's a terrible news story about David Seymour's school lunch program. And on Tuesday, we saw this happen again. Seymour once again made headlines multiple times during the day. This was the Herald where David Seymour says something is half of their front page New Zealand video content. And honestly, the editorial decisions here are strange. Every major news outlet ran with ACT Party will run candidates in local elections, and David Seymour says Jesus was probably an ACT voter. And Radio New Zealand ran this story on Winston Peters' completely pointless visit to the United States with a picture of David Seymour. But not every platform ran the story of the school in Christchurch who wants to remove themselves from Seymour's school lunch program, and Seymour has said no. David Seymour saying historical figures who stood for the complete opposite of his party and its values is not uncommon. He's done it before with many, many other historical figures. It's hardly newsworthy. And announcing his party's going to be running candidates in local body elections, well, that's also a nothing announcement that still warranted media outlets live streaming the damn thing. Political parties have long run candidates in local elections. Labour and the Greens often endorse or run candidates in some of the largest urban areas in the country, and they've done so for years. And as much as I disagree with most things ACT do, I believe voters have a right to choose and to know where the people that they're voting for stand on issues. This is a shorthand for that. We saw last local body election when groups deliberately hid their true intentions and affiliations to be elected, then to make the country ungovernable, after all. We can avoid that from happening with an ACT candidate self-identifying, and at least this way voters will be able to ask candidates directly what that candidate knew about Tim Jargo and his sexual offending leading up to October's local body election, or why it's so important for them to have semi-automatic weapons brought back into their communities. I'm sure they feel really safe with that. The real concern, though, with ACT and local elections isn't one that's really been covered in the media coverage so far, which, is really basically ACT said that they're going to do this. They don't have details, but they promise they're going to do it. It's filler pieces that tell us David Seymour opened his mouth. The real risk here is actually how much ability ACT has to manipulate the rules around local electioneering. It's pretty much a given that any ACT candidate running in a local authority with a Māori ward referendum will be there to tell voters why ACT says they shouldn't support the wards. But there are strict rules in place about how much a candidate can spend based on population size of where they're running, but not so much for third-party promoters. And as a third-party promoter for a candidate that they endorse, ACT has a hell of a financial war chest. They may represent just 8% of voters, but those 8% tend to either be very wealthy or very poor and incredibly stupid enough to think that the wealthy actually really care about them, or at least hate Māori as much as they do. For 2023, ACT accumulated $4.2 million in party donations over 20 grand, including $100,000 from the richest man in the country and a heap from property development linked groups and individuals who have a vested interest in shaping council laws around property development. And total election expenses during the monitored election period was nearly $2 million less than what they raised. And local body elections don't have a range of rules around third-party promoters like a general election, so there's nothing stopping ACT or any of its proxies from using their substantial resources to appeal to the demographics most likely to vote. And there is unfortunately a correlation between those most likely to vote in local body elections, their susceptibility to emotionally driven online campaigns which don't rely on facts and evidence, and the belief of the word of woke being some kind of insult. But putting those concerns into a news article is almost impossible, because news has to deal with facts that could be proven in a court of law or any other place that you've got to prove what it was that was said or done. They can spin them, but news like this can really only say so much. And they can't really turn around and say, this is why it's a real concern right now, without having a whole bunch of experts on hand. It won't be until October that it becomes news and not just opinion. But that doesn't mean that our media has to keep platforming everything David Seymour says, like every utterance is of national significance. As long as outlets, though, are getting interactions or engagement or reach from putting that out there, they're going to continue to do that. But it should, hopefully, act as a bit of a reminder for voters as well out there to make sure that your voting details are up to date before this year's local body election. Hello there, kia ora, and welcome to this week's The News. Health Minister Simeon Brown, seen here trying his best not to follow up a press member's comment of "mana mana" with "do-do-de-do-do," has told medical professionals they need to stop commenting publicly on issues like healthy eating and advocating for healthier lifestyles without sign-off from the ministry itself. When asked for a follow-up comment, Brown went on to say, as a government that rolled back New Zealand's smoke-free laws and increased the risks of road deaths with higher speed limits, we can't see how doctors would possibly know more about people's health than the expert lobbyists we already work with. Acting Prime Minister David Seymour, seen here doing his Kermit the Frog impression, has backed up Minister Brown's edict on medical professionals, publicly commenting, saying it's about time we put those Muppets back in their box. Said a spokesperson for the Medical Council, "I think they're worried that people will start to raise the curtain, think it's time to light those lights. They think it's time to show what the ACT Party is up to tonight." Statistics New Zealand's latest economic data show that the country has just left the worst recession on record since the early 90s with a 0.7% growth measurement in the last quarter. While the economy is still smaller than it was a year ago, the number of children living in poverty has increased, the number of people on benefits has increased, the number of people dealing with homelessness has increased, the increased cost of living, including transportation costs, power, food, rents, and rates, helped see an increase in spending, which led to the very small rise in GDP. Said Nicola Willis, seen here mimicking data from Star Trek when he was confused about how humans work. We said we'd focus on the cost of living, and you clearly see that our work has paid off for shareholders everywhere. A new Ipsos-issued monitor poll released on Friday gave the coalition the lowest rating seen since the report began in 2017. The poll asks respondents about the issues that they feel are most important to them about the country and which parties they feel are best suited to fix them. And the current poll saw Labour being seen as the most well-positioned to deal with 15 of the top 20 issues as identified by respondents. The Greens also were seen to be the top of a number of issues, as was Te Pāti Māori. Said Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, seen here annoyed that it was a different Air New Zealand CEO who secured the Memorandum of Understanding with Indian Airlines to plan direct flights by 2028, and not him. Look, what I'm saying to you is we may have slashed and burned the country and sold our soul with the coalition agreements, but we can all agree that at least people still believe we're good with the economy, no matter the evidence to the contrary. The Defence Force has announced further civilian restructuring with the expected loss of almost 400 roles. While the Prime Minister said that these matters are operational for the force, a spokesperson for the civilian support workers said, "Hey, look, I'm sorry, I don't have time to comment because these budget changes to pay for those landlord tax breaks and tobacco company kickbacks means that I'm doing the work of 4 people right now." Waka Kotahi has agreed to open public feedback on 16 stretches of highway that pass through urban areas on the automatic speed limit changes that the government directed them to increase after overwhelming responses from the impacted communities. The automatic speed increases were an ideological choice instigated by the government after years of research, public consultation, and expert advice saw many lowered for public safety. Said a spokesperson for Waka Kotahi, "We are stuck in the middle here. We want to keep people alive, but the government has other priorities. But at least we're not like councils, who have been told that they have to make the same decisions based on the same lack of evidence from the government, and they just want to keep the communities safe. And their impacts are potentially far wider because of the urban area speed increases. But legally, they're not allowed to even reconsider the changes." Former TVNZ presenter Samantha Bailey, seen here reacting to finding out that you didn't wash your hands after going to the bathroom because she believes viruses aren't real, was struck off the medical register this week and ordered to pay $148,000 in legal costs for a lengthy legal battle to allow her to spread COVID disinformation that went all the way to the High Court. According to the ruling, the Medical Code of Ethics means limitations on the right to free speech in a professional capacity if not presented in a well-rounded and balanced way. They found Bailey had breached that rule. Said Health Minister Simeon Brown, "What's her number? We might have a job for someone with her skills." Western Bay of Plenty District Council has this week quit Local Government New Zealand. Claims during the debate were made that LGNZ had swung far left, that were made by far-right councillor Margaret Murray Benge. Benge went on to say, "Sure, I may stand side by side with my partner Don Brash in Hobson's Pledge, but that definitely makes everything I don't like far left and probably woke, and I can't stand for that." Taranaki Region Council has been struggling to form an apology to locals, especially Māori, after right-wing councillors who have spent over 40 years putting together submissions to government decided that the council wasn't a political body that should be involved in policy direction, and therefore closed off public consultation on a bill submission on the Treaty Principles Bill. The entire situation was made worse when the chair of the council, Craig Williamson, seen here chillaxing with some mates, was unable to deliver an apology after those same councillors debated so long about his speaking slot he missed a chance to make an apology. Said a spokesperson for the right-wing councillors, "We absolutely believe in healthy discussion around issues, as long as it's from the small group of people who actually take an interest in what we do and agree with our antiquated perspectives." US President Donald Trump, seen here in the naughty corner waiting for his diaper to be changed, today signed an executive order calling for the elimination of the US Education Department, which he did in front of a mock classroom full of students because of what he calls the pollution of liberal ideology. Said New Zealand's Education Minister Erica Stanford, seen here waiting to see if the cup of tea that you've got in your hand leads to the sunken place, We're not looking to follow suit, but we can see by how many people actually voted for and support the coalition government that we don't really need to worry about education levels here. They're already low enough. And finally, Far North District Mayor Moko Te Pānea, seen here learning that he could make it as a model if the whole mayor thing doesn't work out, has announced a new policy to combat an exponential rise in online racism on their social media pages. Te Pānea noted that when funding rounds for Matariki events came up, the number of anonymous racist troll accounts making racist comments increases exponentially, despite the same funding rounds also being available for other public celebrations like Easter or Christmas. The approach? Delete their comments and block their profiles. Said Te Pānea, free speech is a right we all share, but that doesn't mean you're guaranteed an ability to use our profile to say what you want. He also pointed out that the hardline approach has seen a massive increase in positive online interactions with people being much more vocal in their support for diverse groups within the region. Said spokesperson for New Zealand's mainstream media, wait, we can block them? I thought we were meant to make them top fans and platform everything they said. This could be game-changing if we didn't need the engagement metrics to sell to advertisers. Again, thank you all for the support this week. I'm Paul, and that's been this week's The News. Hey, thanks for checking out this week's Omnibus edition. It wasn't particularly long, so I guess you can have the rest of your afternoon back. Entirely up to you. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel so you can get updates as they come out. Until next time, live long, prosper, be one with the Force, and I will catch you guys all later. Hey, thanks for checking out today's video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe so you get more updates as we go along. We deal with these guys for the rest of the year.